And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, Salesforce's Mark Benioff speaking at his company's annual Dreamforce conference. We hear from the outspoken CEO on his new co-CEO, his new magazine, and the responsibility tech leaders have to shape the world. Plus, filtering out, Instagram's founders are leaving Facebook. The surprise exit raising concerns about the future of the platform and its competition with Snapchat. And Pichai on the Hill, the Google CEO, finally heads to Washington to meet with lawmakers behind closed doors. Can he convince them that there is no left-wing bias at Google? But first, to our top story. Salesforce kicks off its annual Dreamforce conference this week in San Francisco with a record 170,000 attendees. And this year, the company's outspoken co-founder, Mark Benioff, has a lot to talk about. In the last few months, Benioff has bought the iconic but struggling media property, Time Magazine. He's opened the Salesforce Tower, the tallest building west of the Mississippi. And he's taken on a co-CEO, promoting Keith Block to the top job. We sat down with Benioff for a wide-ranging interview about the state of the company, the economy, and Facebook, a company he says should be regulated like big tobacco. And as usual, he didn't hold back his strong opinions. I started by asking why Benioff decided to share his job and his title with his new co-CEO.
Keith is fabulous. He's been with us for 5 years. He is a great operator. He's done a great job at Salesforce, and I really feel like he needed to be recognized. Now he's co-CEO. The company is more successful than ever, and I couldn't be happier.
Co-CEOs haven't necessarily worked out in other places. It's been harder to be decisive, harder to be ambitious. Some would argue it hasn't helped Oracle much at all. How do you avoid those challenges?
Decisiveness and ambition, well, those are things that I tend to be okay on. So I don't think those will be issues. Look, we already have a great relationship. And because we had a great relationship, really giving him the title, co-CEO, really was kind of how we were running the company in partnership. Look, I've been running Salesforce in one capacity or another now for 20 years. Titles don't really mean anything to me. The most important thing to me is the success of all of our stakeholders, our customers, our employees, our partners, our public schools, the community. That's what I really focus on. I'm so excited that Keith is now co-CEO with me. Salesforce is just stronger because of it.
There were reports that Salesforce was interested in trying to buy Twitter, which investors didn't seem too excited about. But do you still see an opportunity or the possibility of Salesforce having a consumer-facing subsidiary someday?
Well, today we have billions of users who are using Salesforce's products in one direction or another. The most important thing to me is that I'm managing for all of our stakeholders and that I'm listening deeply. And when you think about investors, believe me, they're one of my key stakeholders. Customers are a stakeholder, employees are a stakeholder, our public schools, I just mentioned, as a stakeholder, investors are a stakeholder. I'm about to meet with them, and you're probably going to cover that. When I meet with those investors, I am deeply listening to them, and when they said, we would like you to buy this company, or don't buy that company, or we want this strategic relationship, I take that very seriously, and consistently, and over now, we've been a public company 14 years, we've been in business for 20 years, we listen to them. You look at our stock chart over the last 14 years, the reason it's up and to the right is because we listen deeply to all of our stakeholders, including our investors.
So what does the M&A future look like, and do you have any interest still in buying Twitter?
I look at every company, you know that. We have to evaluate every deal. We have to look at private companies, public companies. We just acquired a couple of amazing companies. You saw that we bought an amazing company called Datorama, so we're able to do marketing analytics in an incredible and amazing new way. But this summer, we also bought an amazing integration capability, and you'll see in the Dreamforce keynote today, a whole new vision of customer success called Customer 360, built with MuleSoft. This is a company we bought for $7 billion. We are deeply integrating that product right now with that company. It's incredible. It's one of the reasons that we just raised our guidance again and why we're so excited about our future. So you're going to continue to see us do deals where it makes sense for our customer and where we're helping to get our customers to connect with their customer in a whole new way.
Speaking of acquisitions, Facebook, of course, bought Instagram 6 years ago. We now know the founders are leaving. This was one of the big bright spots for the company. Is that a bad sign for Facebook? Is it a sign that something's gone wrong?
It's a sign for them, and they need to start paying attention. I've been talking about this for 9 months. Our industry has changed. You've already seen this. Every CEO needs to ask themselves, what is the most important thing to you? What is the most important thing to your company? What is your highest value? I know what our highest value is at Salesforce. It's trust. Nothing is more important than the trust that we have with our customers, our employees, our partners, our top executives. When you see top executives walking out, when you see customers questioning your privacy practices, or how you're using or misusing their data, or how you're misusing partnerships, you need to listen, you need to wake up, you need to say, what is going on? It's very serious. And I'm not going to call out any one company and say, this company has to change, these executives have left. What I'm saying is, for every CEO in our industry, we see what the employees are saying. We have to operate at a higher level. Let me give you an example. We just created a new Office of Ethical and Humane Use, reporting directly to me. Because when employees have concerns, or customers or partners or other stakeholders, I want them to be able to come directly to me and have that conversation. We're in the fourth industrial revolution, and everyone wants to know, is your product being used ethically and humanely? Every company has to operate at a higher standard. Every enterprise company like us, and every consumer company like a Facebook and others. Every CEO has to look at this. It's very serious, and that's why the government is involved. You know, I called for regulation in January at the World Economic Forum.
Right, you said that Facebook should be regulated like big tobacco. That was before Cambridge Analytica. That was before they were called to testify.
Yes.
How should they be regulated now? How do you think they should be regulated?
Facebook is the new cigarettes. It's addictive. It's not good for you. Consumers need to be aware of what can happen. That's why the government is involved and needs to be more involved in the regulation of Facebook and other social media companies, and in the example of companies that have questions about, are their products being used ethically or humanely? They need to create structures where they're able to evaluate the ethical and humane use of their technology. Technology is never good or bad. It's never good or bad. It's how you use the technology that matters. But you have to be crystal clear with your employees, your customers, your partners, with everybody, what your values are, what your practices are. And if you don't, then you're going to see customers leave you, or executives leave you, or employees leave you. And we have examples of that now throughout our whole industry this year. You know that. You've been reporting on them. You're going to see more of this until CEOs change. They all need to change, and they need to pay attention. That's true for me. That's true for every CEO in our industry.
You think Mark Zuckerberg's not paying attention?
I think every CEO has to get to another level of excellence. There's no question. Look, in the fourth industrial revolution, Emily, we're all connected. Everyone and everything is connected. You know that. Look at this show. It's amazing what is happening, the examples. But when everything is connected, everything has changed. And behind all of this is our core values of our company, built on trust. Those companies also have to articulate, what are their values? What is important to them? What are they willing to stand for? And then we'll know if they're really acting correctly, because their employees will stay, their executives will stay, their customers will stay, their shareholders will stay. And you will not have that question. It should not be a question that any reporter or any CEO has to ask.
Now,
we all have to look at this very deeply right now.
You have had some employees be critical of the work that Salesforce does with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. You've said that your software isn't involved in family separations. There are some protests happening outside. We've heard some customers aren't happy. What's your response to that?
Well, I think that this is a time, a moment in history, where I, the CEO of Salesforce, and every CEO has to deeply listen to every stakeholder. And if 15 people show up outside the conference, even if we have 170,000 people here, I don't dismiss them. I listen to them. I have engaged with them. And every employee and everyone who's asked a question, I personally have called. And based on that, what I heard was, are you deeply committed to the ethical and humane use of the technology? Wow, yes, I am. Show us. So I've created a whole new structure in the company, a whole Office of Ethical and Humane Use, run by Tony Profit, our Chief Equality Officer. And we have partnered with the leading ethics organizations in the world to build a structure that we can bring everyone in and have this conversation. This conversation is not going away. It's not. Because now that technology is at the center of everything that we do, ethics are at the center of everything that we do, and every CEO will have to answer that question: are you operating ethically and humanely?
You and your wife Lynn are buying Time magazine. You've said you're not going to get involved in editorial decisions, but you clearly have very strong views, strong political views, strong ethical views. How do you plan to run this magazine? And is it not, how can it not be an opportunity to take a moral stand?
We could not be, my wife and I, Lynn, could not be more excited about the opportunity now to be the stewards of this historic and iconic brand. I mean, our whole history of our nation is reflected in the covers of Time magazine, of the editorial, of the stories, the photographs. It's amazing what Time magazine represents, and the opportunity to acquire the company and help be the stewards for the future was something we could not pass up. And I hope that it will continue to be a positive global impact opportunity the way that it has been for the last century. I hope that we'll be able to usher it into the next century as well.
Did you talk to Bezos at all about his experience with the Washington Post? So how can we be sure your political views won't have an influence on the kind of coverage that Time does?
We're committed to keeping our relationship with Time magazine at arm's length. The editorial team is one of the best in the world. Everybody knows that. We're going to maintain that incredible editorial team, incredible editorial leadership, and deliver a world-class product. This is going to be a fabulous opportunity for us to unshackle Time and let it run as an independent organization. It's been a long time since Time magazine was independent and could do whatever it wants. Now that we're going to see this amazing team and let them go and do something incredible.
So you got a co-CEO now, an iconic magazine. You continue to focus on your philanthropy. Would you consider running for public office?
Business is the greatest platform for change. Our opportunity to change the world is right here. We understand already, we can see our politicians are fundamentally not able to do that. You know, the opportunity for change today is with business. Yes, the political structure, it has to be a public-private partnership. The mayors were just here, our superintendents of schools were just here, our local officials are here, our state, federal, and government officers are all here. Let's bring everybody together. Let's create a more positive world together. It has to be a multi-stakeholder dialogue. That's how we'll create multi-stakeholder action. You don't need me as a political official. I don't think I would be a very good one. I'm not, you know me very well, you know. The reality is, Emily, I feel very empowered and enabled to make a positive impact on the world based on the platforms that I've been given, and I'm very grateful for that.
Salesforce has done the hard work to close the pay gap. Now we hear about the equity gap across industry, and in Silicon Valley especially. What is the hard work that you're doing year after year after year to make sure the pay gap and the equity gap doesn't widen again?
Every CEO needs to be focused on equality. At this show, you're going to see, you can see right behind us, we have the most diverse and inclusive set of customers and partners and employees in the industry, and we're working to make it even more so. That is one of the key equity gaps that I see, bringing everybody in, having true inclusive capitalism. We're also fighting for gender equality so that every man and woman is paid equally. We're fighting for LGBTQ equality so that we do not discriminate against the LGBTQ community. We are also working to make sure that we have the equality of every human being, and these aren't just the values here in San Francisco, Emily, which is easy because we're the summer of love, the home of summer of love, right here. Everywhere we go in the world, we're the same set of values, so we're going to fight for that. Trust, customer success, innovation, equality, these are our core values. You can't separate that from Salesforce, so we're going to take it to the next level.
But you've committed to doing these audits every year, right?
Yes.
When it comes to pay. Talk to me about the work that involves.
It's a huge amount of work to pay attention globally. Are you paying men and women the same? The first time we did the audit, we realized we weren't, and it cost us millions of dollars so that we made men and women the same in pay. Why are we paying men and women differently? Then we bought a lot of companies. We did a second audit, and do you want to know what we found? Again, we had a mismatch because when you buy a company, Emily, you don't just buy their technology and their culture, you buy their pay scales. And guess what happened? We bought this mismatch, so we leveled that out. And every year, we will make sure and we will guarantee that we are paying men and women equally in this company. And we evangelize that for all of our customers and partners to do the same thing.
Salesforce co-founder Mark Benioff speaking earlier at the Dreamforce conference right here in San Francisco. Not holding back. Coming up, we just heard Mark Benioff share his take on Instagram's founders leaving Facebook. Now we will dig in on what really led to their departure and how the street took this surprise announcement. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio, listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Instagram's co-founders unfriend Facebook. Sources tell Bloomberg Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger are leaving over growing tension with CEO Mark Zuckerberg. The duo had been at the company since Facebook acquired Instagram back in 2012, and they had largely been able to operate independently of Facebook and CEO Mark Zuckerberg, keeping control of the brand and the product. But lately, they've become frustrated with an unusual uptick in day-to-day involvement by Zuckerberg, who's now more reliant on Instagram, now worth $100 billion, for Facebook's future growth. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Sarah Fryer, who's been reporting on this. And Sarah, what happened?
So you're absolutely right that Facebook is so much more dependent on Instagram now than it ever was, because Facebook's own growth is going to slow. They're going to have to spend more to grow in new areas. And Instagram is so crucial to that picture because it just hit 1 billion users, but there's many more users they can still add. The advertising business is thriving, and they have this new product, Stories, that everyone wants to use. So there's been a lot more attention paid to the ways that Instagram could drive traffic to Facebook, which is kind of a new dynamic. Basically, in the past, Instagram was very dependent on Facebook for its growth. Now, Facebook is becoming more dependent on Instagram.
Now, 2 years ago, I sat down with Kevin Systrom, and I asked him, do you regret selling? You know, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion, and then they went on to buy WhatsApp for $20 billion. And of course, he said no. And he talked about all the great things that Facebook had done for Instagram. And he also talked about how great it was to work with Mark Zuckerberg. Take a listen to what he told me 2 years ago.
Think of it like having the best board member in the world. I mean, imagine how many companies would love to have Mark Zuckerberg on their board. That's what we get. And it's independent, but also you get amazing guidance and amazing counsel from someone who's been able to build a tremendous company.
Fast forward to today, this is what Kevin Systrom says in his statement. We're planning on leaving Instagram to explore our curiosity and creativity again. Building new things requires that we step back, understand what inspires us, and match that with what the world needs. That is what we plan to do. Now, missing from the statement was anything about Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, what I thought was fascinating about that statement is at the very end, he says, you know, something to the tune of, I wish the best of luck for both companies going forward. They're the same company. When the founders leave Instagram, it is no longer this sort of company within Facebook. It becomes more of a Facebook product arm. And there's nobody with really the authority of a founder to challenge Zuckerberg's vision, should they want to, and say, you know, really, this is not where we see Instagram going. We want to do it this way. Systrom has been historically very stubborn in terms of the product and his vision for it and what he wanted to maintain for the culture. And so, you know, this opens up opportunities for Zuckerberg to do more, to do what he wants, to integrate Instagram. At the same time, it could threaten this kind of unique brand that the company has built.
Now, meantime, Mark Zuckerberg did say, Kevin and Mike are extraordinary product leaders, and Instagram reflects their combined creative talents. I've learned a lot working with them for the past 6 years and have really enjoyed it. I wish them all the best, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they build next. Now, the WhatsApp co-founders have also left the company. In fact, Brian Atkin, one of the co-founders, tried to kick off this #DeleteFacebook movement. You know, this does not look good. What are employees on the inside telling you? Are they seeing this tension?
Well, that WhatsApp situation with the founders of WhatsApp being replaced by somebody who'd run internet.org at Facebook, Chris Daniels, that was heralded as like a scary thing that could potentially happen to Instagram if Facebook wasn't careful, right? That they could sort of lose what they'd built in this independent brand. So there's definitely a lot of concern about what happens now. I'm told that the most likely person to take over Instagram from here is Adam Mosseri, who previously ran Facebook's newsfeed and was hired by Kevin to come be Instagram's head of product. But this is a lot of change for Instagram in such a short period of time.
Right, the COO Marnie Levine.
The CEO Marnie Levine
back into Facebook.
And so they've lost their CEO, CTO, COO. Are there going to be any other C-level people in the future? I mean, that's really what Facebook has to decide here. How much do they want to integrate Instagram, and how quickly should they move to do it?
All right, Sarah Fryer, I know you're going to continue to report on this, and we look forward to hearing what you find. Thanks so much. Certainly unexpected. Coming up, Uber drivers are dealt a huge blow as a San Francisco judge blocks thousands of drivers from suing for better pay and better benefits. We'll have that story next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology. Be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. It is a major loss for Uber drivers. A federal appeals court in San Francisco has barred hundreds of thousands of drivers from suing as a group for better pay and benefits. However, the ruling wasn't unexpected. In May, the Supreme Court bolstered the power of employers to force workers to use individual arbitration instead of class action lawsuits. Amazon has come up with another way to get Alexa into your home. The maker of the smart home devices is investing in a $6.7 million funding round for Plant Prefab. This is a company that makes modules that can quickly be assembled into a home at a job site. Amazon is making the investment through its Alexa fund, which backs startups that use voice technology. And the FANG stocks could be adding a letter. Nomura Internet analyst Dan Dolev told clients on Tuesday that Square should be the newest member of the FANG complex, highlighting the fintech firm's buoyant payment volume. He raised his price by nearly 50% to $125. Square shares have gained more than 160% this year. BNN Bloomberg's Amanda Lang spoke with Square CFO Sarah Fryer about the company's growing user base. You can check that out online. Coming up. After ducking a congressional testimony, Google CEO Sundar Pichai is heading to Washington. Will he be able to quell a rising wave of congressional anger directed at the search giant? That's next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Google is tweaking its blanket ban on cryptocurrency-related advertising. The tech giant says it will now allow regulated cryptocurrency exchanges in Japan and the U.S. to run ads on its website. In a blog posted Tuesday, Google said advertisers will need to be certified with Google for the specific country in which their ads will serve. Advertisers can apply for certification starting in October. Staying with Google, the company has been a favorite punching bag of conservative politicians of late. First, there was President Trump claiming Google's news search results are biased against him and Republicans. Then it was a flack Google took for not sending a top executive like co-founder Larry Page or CEO Sundar Pichai to testify on Capitol Hill a couple of weeks ago. A slight that led to an empty chair alongside C-suite leaders from Twitter and Facebook. But now Pichai will be meeting with lawmakers to defend Google, saying in a statement, quote, "I look forward to meeting with members on both sides of the aisle, answering a wide range of questions and explaining our approach. These meetings will continue Google's long history of engaging with Congress, including testifying 7 times to Congress this year." To discuss, we've got Bloomberg's Ben Brody in Washington, who covers tech lobbying, and in studio, Bloomberg Tech's executive editor, Tom Giles. So, Ben, I'll start with you. We also know that Sundar Pichai will be testifying at some point later this year after the midterm elections. But what can you tell us about this meeting with lawmakers and what might transpire there?
Well, I think the focus will really be on two things. One of those is the allegations of anti-conservative bias that you talked about, that sort of punching bag that we've had here. And I think some of those concerns are genuine, at least on the part of lawmakers. What Pichai has to do is sort of convince those lawmakers, talk about their approach, as he said, that what they think is anti-conservative bias in search results and news and things like that came about because of something else in the algorithm. Now, he might sort of be able to talk a little bit else about what goes on in there, but of course it's always a little bit of a black box, and that does worry people. The other thing that I expect to be a huge issue, the attempt to get back into the Chinese market, that's worried a lot of lawmakers, and I think it would probably be a major talking point.
Kevin McCarthy, House Majority Leader, tweeting, "The American people deserve the facts, not slanted viewpoints. These platforms should clearly note what is news and opinion. Hashtag stop the bias." He was retweeting a tweet from Brad Parscale, President Trump's 2020 campaign manager. Tom, how much of an uphill battle is Google going to be fighting here? This is after video leaked of Sergey Brin telling the entire company that he found the election of Donald Trump offensive.
Right. And it didn't help that, as you pointed out, they didn't send a high enough level executive. So Sundar really has his work cut out for him. Certainly Google needs to, Google's strength is blind them with science. They need to come in and explain to them that our algorithms don't favor one side or the other. They can also remind them that their platforms are very much have a way of disseminating a lot of right-wing points of view. They have been a platform that the Trump administration has been able to use to its advantage. These are the things that Google needs to emphasize. They also need to bring it back to this question of the public good. Do we do a public good? What are the services that Google provides to the consumer free of charge, and how does the consumer benefit from that? Is society better off for us being there, or is it worse off? And that's something that Google executives really need to emphasize.
Google certainly didn't skip that testimony without understanding what the consequences would be. And Ben, I wonder, do you think it's a smart strategy that they've essentially separated themselves from the social media companies, which certainly have been getting dragged down? They're not exactly all in the same boat or all in the same business. And could not going a couple of weeks ago work in Google's favor?
Yeah, I think it's possible that that's the case. I think for the last few months we've been concentrating a lot here in Washington on Facebook, and they've sort of taken a lot of the heat. I think things really did turn a couple weeks ago, and I do think it was a little bit of a miscalculation, and then we are really focusing on Google now. The advantage that Pichai will have when he testifies openly in November is that Republicans may not be looking as much for that punching bag that you mentioned, because it'll be after the midterm elections, and punching bags do tend to come out right before November. The problem that he's going to face a little bit is that we believe he's going to be testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. He had the option of the Senate Intel Committee. The Senate Intel Committee has been relatively bipartisan, hasn't really been looking at political bias, things of that nature. The House Judiciary Committee has really sort of doubled down and held a number of hearings on alleged anti-conservative bias. And so I think you would face some really tough and possibly fractious questioning there.
Meantime, we've also been following the Department of Justice's decision to take a closer look at big tech. Attorney General Jeff Sessions met with state attorneys general to talk about things like privacy. We caught up with the Attorney General of California after that meeting. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The conversation really focused on the issue of competition and the whole issue of antitrust and privacy, and a great deal of conversation about privacy. Many states, I believe, are interested in trying to make sure that our consumers are as protected as possible when it comes to their personal information. We've seen what happens when some of this personal information gets out there in public sphere, and we want to make sure we can keep that information for that person private.
Still, Ben, after this meeting today, they decided not to open an investigation. Why not? And does it mean one couldn't be opened at some point later?
I think an investigation could basically be opened at any point. This Justice Department and lots of Justice Departments often like states to continue to do what they're doing, and there are states that are probing these privacy concerns, as well as possibly some anti-competitive concerns. One of the interesting things that I think came out of the meeting was the idea that Attorney General Jeff Sessions may believe that antitrust law is a way of confronting this alleged anti-conservative bias. That would be out of the mainstream, certainly, out of the legal mainstream, if he did believe that. But what I took from Becerra and what I took from the meeting is that the focus here really seems to be on consumer protection and privacy, and it seems like the states increasingly are going to be talking to one another as they look into things like Cambridge Analytica or the Google location sharing.
Tom, are we expecting new legislation?
It's really
Privacy legislation, other regulation.
The big area that the AGs want to steer clear of is this whole idea of political bias. Because once you start legislating that, you start legislating free speech. And they really want to steer clear of that. As much as Jeff Sessions seems to have tried to bring it around to, hey, there's this bias, there's this censoring of opposing views, AGs do not want to get into the business of censoring, of dictating to Facebook and Google and other platforms, here's what you can and can't do. And there's really no legal basis for it. They really don't have much to stand on, which is why you keep hearing them come back to privacy and antitrust.
All right, Tom Giles, our executive editor, Ben Brody for us in Washington. I know we're going to continue to follow all of this and new developments as we have them. Coming up next, our exclusive conversation with J.Crew CEO Jim Brett. How the company is leveraging social media and just why Amazon is the quote-unquote perfect partner. Plus, it's Qualcomm versus Apple. The company's long-running legal battle heats up with yet another accusation of intellectual property theft. Is there a chance for settlement left? This is Bloomberg. Last quarter, J.Crew finally posted same-store sales growth, breaking 15 consecutive quarters of negative comparable sales. In the last 2 weeks, CEO Jim Brett relaunched the brand. For our new Retail Interrupted series, Brett sits down for an exclusive interview with Bloomberg's retail reporter Emma Chandra, where he also discusses the company's recent decision to sell its mercantile brand on Amazon.
So I really don't believe that we compete with Amazon on the main J.Crew line. I see the products that are being sold on Amazon as more value-oriented. And Mercantile really is a new brand as well that's geared towards a younger customer, still with the preppy spirit and a greater value. And we felt like Amazon was the perfect home to launch that new brand.
But you're not worried then about cannibalization?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Are you concerned at all about how they might use your sales data?
I think we have a strong partnership with Amazon, and I believe that we will maximize the sales for J.Crew Mercantile by growing J.Crew Mercantile. Do you envisage further J.Crew Group brands being sold on Amazon? Not at the moment. Not at the moment, not in the near future? Mm-mm. You also developed a number of other third-party relationships. More recently, obviously, Nordstrom, Net-a-Porter, ASOS. How big a part of the business do you see wholesale becoming for J.Crew? So in the short term, wholesale has been a huge global opportunity for us. We have our wonderful relationship in the U.S. with Nordstrom, but we did not have relationships across the globe. So recently, we launched all across Europe in all of the major department stores and in South America as well, and we're exploring opportunities in Asia now. 2 weeks ago, you relaunched the J.Crew brand. What sort of response have you had from customers? Are you seeing increased traffic, higher sales? We're excited about the relaunch. We're definitely seeing an increase in new customers as well as reactivated customers, so people that have left the brand and are coming back to J.Crew. And are they spending as much as you would like? They are. It's an exciting time. When I started, I received so many emails from customers saying, I loved J.Crew, but I've grown out of the brand, meaning physically. It doesn't fit me anymore. And we are now receiving so many comments via social media of people who are so happy to be able to shop the brand again. So inclusivity isn't just about trying to be everything to everybody. It's about, in whatever you're doing, including as many people as possible. In fact, we received a comment on Instagram from a woman who said, "Thank you so much for showing the extended sizes. Please keep doing it. It helps me a lot."
You've talked there a lot about engagement through social media. That was another thing that we saw with the relaunch, is change in marketing strategy, or a shift really to more digital marketing. Have you also relaunched what I guess I would call the back end of the business as well? How much have supply chains changed? How much has inventory management changed at J.Crew?
So that's really the work that's been happening over the past year. So a lot of it has changed. We have organize the business to be able to be more responsive to the customer needs, essentially a more customer-centric back-end process.
That was J.Crew CEO Jim Brett in an exclusive interview with Bloomberg's Emma Chandra. So while J.Crew might welcome a partnership with Amazon, the CEO of Shopify says Amazon is encroaching on its turf. But Tobias Lutke is confident that Shopify, which provides online stores for more than 600,000 businesses, is, quote, very confident it can compete with the e-commerce giant. In fact, in an exclusive interview with BNN Bloomberg's Amanda Lang, Lutke said he welcomes the competition and added that he has a strong warning for Canadian lawmakers who might want to copy President Trump's tax cuts.
I think every country should, including Canada, should continue looking at its taxes, optimize it, but do it evidence-based. I do think that the American tax reform was largely emotion-based and not data science or anything other based than that. And I think they are attempting a very dangerous experiment over there, and I want to caution Canada for doing the same, frankly. So I want to be a bit more careful.
In your own business globally, we've heard also from CEOs lately and experts that the Chinese relationship is still a difficult one,
right,
including the big sticking point right now on trade, which is intellectual property theft. What's your thinking around that, and how careful you are about China? Intellectual
property theft is sort of its own topic. It's very complex, very multifaceted. It's both at the same time overblown in some ways and underappreciated in others. I think it's a reality of the globalized economy that everyone has to be very aware of how to deal with IP in general. And we are definitely out of there was a time period where you really didn't have to think a lot about these kind of things, and that's over. But that's not even specific to China. That's actually generally a global kind of thing. And if you talk about the trade war, which kind of presents a certain opportunity for Canada specifically, I think we have this economical situation with an overhang of NAFTA where no one really knows which way that's going to go. And I think it's an opportunity in general for Canada to say, hey, significant percentage of the trade with this country is the United States, and we want to probably diversify that a little bit, look at Asia, look at Europe. We have a free trade agreement with Europe, and I think that may end up being quite good for the economy to have a little bit of a think there.
And that adaptiveness that characterizes your customer base is what you responded to in the first place. How do you constantly respond to that while flying the plane?
Yeah, I mean, this is no different for Shopify, the company itself. Again, we had people, we had merchants sell globally. The global situation, as we just talked about, changes a lot. But it also, we are so used to it even changing on a technology basis. Shopify is best known for helping people with their online stores, which is a big channel, but you also sometimes buy something from Shopify stores when you buy on Amazon, on Facebook, on Instagram, everywhere, in stores. All of this is Shopify behind it. The interesting thing is that is very transient. So 5 or 10 years ago, we would have a MySpace, we would have help people sell through MySpace because that was a big factor. That's no longer a factor. So we are, as technology company in the retail space, very confident with our adaptability, because that's really a core value of the business and something we take very seriously.
That was Shopify CEO Tobias Lutke speaking with BNN Bloomberg's Amanda Lang. Coming up, Qualcomm throws another IP dispute into its showdown with Apple. Is there still a chance of a settlement? That's next. This is Bloomberg. It seems like a never-ending battle between Qualcomm and Apple. In yet another dispute over intellectual property, Qualcomm is now claiming that Apple used its software to help Intel improve its own chips. The accusation follows more than 70 suits and countersuits between the two companies over patent royalties and infringements globally. Apple first sued the chip maker for hiking up its licensing fees, and now it exclusively uses Intel chips in new phones. Could this new accusation further hinder a future settlement? Here to discuss, who else but Bloomberg's Ian King. So what does this latest wrinkle mean?
I mean, this is something, as you know, Emily, that came out about a year ago when kind of Qualcomm sort of threw this around, said there was some suspicion it had about what Apple was up to. Now it's saying, hey, look, we've got the evidence. We want to add this to a case that we've already got going on. Clearly, this is another attempt to ratchet up the pressure on Apple and try to force Apple to see things its way.
Is the evidence compelling?
We don't know. I'll have to see. I mean, that's for the judge. The judge has to initially decide whether she's even going to allow that to be considered, or whether there's going to have to be more time for more evidence to be, for discovery and everything else.
We sat down with Qualcomm CEO Steve Mollenkopf for Bloomberg Studio 1.0. The full episode is airing tomorrow, but take a listen to what he had to say about this suit with Apple.
I think there's probably no better opportunity and partner for Qualcomm than to work with Apple. It makes sense that the technology leader in mobile should be partnered with the product leader in mobile. And those things tend to work out. But the way that we think about the business is eventually you get the disputes figured out and you move on into a different period. And I hope to be in that period according to the schedule we've already laid out.
Ian, how do you square that optimism with the filing today and the bitterness?
Yeah, I mean, as you remember from the conversation, what he said was sometimes these things get settled on the courtroom steps. So the basic strategy on both sides, Apple's doing just the same thing, which is as much pressure as you can, force the other side to blink, then we all smile, shake hands, and walk away friends.
What's the chance they're going to smile and shake hands? What's the chance of a settlement?
We haven't seen either side come close to blinking as far as our reporting can show yet.
So what else are we waiting for here?
I mean, the trials have to begin. The juries have to take a look at the evidence. The judges have to show roughly which side might be winning, which might not be winning. Maybe there's an injunction, maybe iPhone shipments stop, who knows? I mean, something like that, which forces either side to take this a bit more seriously.
Either way, at this point, Qualcomm isn't in Apple's new phones.
Correct.
Would we expect that Apple would go back to Qualcomm chips in later generations, or is that done?
I mean, if you believe what Steve told us, then it's basically a case of if we design a better chip, if we can produce something that Apple has to have, they'll find a way to putting it back in there. At the moment, it looks like a distant prospect, though. Right?
How big are the consequences for Qualcomm if they lose?
The consequences are already baked in terms of what it means for their chip business. For their licensing business, though, the consequences are absolutely huge. This is a business that drives the majority of their profit. Without that profit, their R&D suffers. Without that R&D, their ability to push that chip technology forward is also challenged.
What if Apple loses? It's a much smaller issue for them.
Yeah.
Clearly.
I mean,
but what does Apple lose?
Yeah, basically Apple has to go back to perhaps using Qualcomm, and it has to pay, billions of dollars in these licensing fees, and
which they're already paying.
Well, they've stopped paying, right? But they've said that they've put the money in an account. Basically, I mean, it's not chicken feed; it is billions of dollars. But for a company the scale of Apple, it's not going to make a huge difference.
Why do you think Apple is taking this to the wall, given its size and scale and how, in the grand scheme of things, not a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, simple answer is why not, right? They can afford to win, lose or draw. They can afford it. So why not put as much pressure on your opponent as you possibly can?
So when do you expect to see a resolution? I mean, Steve had told us that within this year, there was a possibility he saw of coming to terms.
Right. So we've got these cases coming up in Germany, these cases coming up in China. Those courts have the ability, in theory, to ban the import or export of the iPhone. Clearly, if you're Apple, that is not something which you want to be facing. So assuming that there's a kind of a nudge in that direction or a nudge in the opposite direction, then maybe one side has to cave in when those decisions start to materialize.
So how optimistic are you that something could happen this year? You've been covering this industry for 2 decades.
Yeah,
you know better than anyone,
mean,
except for maybe Steve Mollenkopf.
Qualcomm tends to win, right? Its lawyers, by and large, have won over time.
Why?
They would argue that it's because their intellectual property is so cast iron, so fundamental to what's going on, that as soon as they can get in front of the right format, the right jury, the right judge, they'll win.
All right. Ian King, put a lot of money on what you have to say, so thank you. I know I pushed you on that one. Thank you, as always, Ian King of Bloomberg Tech. You can catch the rest of that conversation with Qualcomm CEO Steve Mollenkopf on Bloomberg Studio 1.0, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. We talk about a lot. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to have the roundup of the Senate Commerce Committee hearing on consumer data privacy. Amazon, Google, Twitter, and Apple executives are all heading to Washington to testify, and we are there. I'm Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg.